I think if you look at all the other videos on this channel dealing with Alvin Plantinga, you'll find a fairly decent introduction to his epistemology when you put the different videos together. Having said that, I think we need a better introduction. I'm now going to begin a short series, I hope it's short, where I go over some of Plantinga's own words with some explanation of what his epistemology is. This will be for the Philosophers in Their Own Words playlist, and it will cover interesting moments in the development of Alvin Plantinga's epistemology with, inshallah, God willing, a working understanding of how his epistemology works. And we start at the beginning with God and Other Minds from 1967, published by Cornell. Here's how that book ends, in the final paragraph. Of course, there may be other reasons for supposing that although rational belief in other minds does not require an answer to the epistemological question, rational belief in the existence of God does. But it is certainly hard to see what these reasons might be. Hence my tentative conclusion. If my belief in other minds is rational, so is my belief in God. But obviously, the former is rational, so therefore is the latter. So, in this book, Plantinga is saying that the belief in other minds is similar to the belief in the existence of God in certain respects, and therefore is probably similar in certain other respects. Well, let's first identify what the belief in other minds is, just in case there's any confusion there. This means the belief that other people have minds, or you might say the belief that other people exist. When you look around you and see other people in the world with your eyes, you look around with your eyes and you see people walking around, the belief in other minds is the belief that those are actual people with actual minds. They're not robots acting in similar ways to you, but not actually being conscious. They're also not non-conscious matrix programs. They're not all figments of your imagination. There's some actual people there. Or you watch the internet, you see me on YouTube, you assume, even though this is a recording and you're not watching me live, you assume that when I recorded this, I was actually there, I was actually aware, I was actually thinking. I was actually in other mind. Other minds are other minds. The belief that other minds exist is the belief Plantinga is talking about here. It's the very common sense belief that you are not the only conscious being in the universe. So Plantinga looks at that belief and at the belief in the existence of God, and he says these beliefs are very similar in that there isn't a lot of great evidence for either, but one of them is rational even without evidence. So probably the other one is rational too. That's the very rudimentary argument Plantinga is making here. Now let's summarize very briefly, and I'll consult my notes here because I don't keep all of this in my head all the time. Let's summarize very briefly what he's talking about. Plantinga has spent, that is to say, what he's talking about with respect to the evidence. Plantinga has spent 270 pages or so of this book so far explaining his views on certain arguments for and against the existence of God, and certain arguments concerning other minds. For the existence of God, he's considered natural theology. That's the project of people who, like Aquinas, argue that God exists based on certain evidence observed in nature. Plantinga considers the cosmological, ontological, and teleological arguments for the existence of God, concluding that they are ultimately unsuccessful. Against the existence of God, Plantinga considers the problem of evil and the free will defense. He ultimately concludes that an argument against God's existence based on evil is inconclusive. The problem of evil fails as an argument against the existence of God, so do several other arguments against the existence of God he considers in Chapter 7. But arguments for the existence of God are not all that great either, and ultimately the natural theological project of proving God's existence through teleological, cosmological, and other arguments, ultimately it's not successful. Well, what about other minds? Plantinga looks at the argument from my knowledge of my own mental state and the similarity of my outward behavior to that of the outward behavior of other bodies. He says the argument is deficient, although it's not terrible. So basically, we're left with the paradigmatically rational belief that I am not the only conscious mind in the universe. Other people, well, other people are people, they exist. Other bodies that look somewhat like mine also have minds attached to them. There are other minds. We're looking at that belief, and we're looking at the belief that God exists. And Plantinga says neither of them has especially good evidence in its favor. But belief in the existence of other minds is perfectly rational. So also is belief in the existence of God. In other words, what we call epistemic parity matters. Epistemic parity means treating similar claims as similar, treating different claims as different. These beliefs are totally the same with respect to evidence. Is there any interesting reason that they should not be considered the same with respect to rationality? One needs evidence. One does not need evidence and is rational. That's the belief in other minds. One does not need evidence and does not have especially good evidence and is perfectly rational. That's the belief in other minds. Well, the existence of God doesn't have especially good evidence for or against. And why should that mean it's not rational? There might be an interesting reason to think that it requires evidence, even though belief in other minds does not. But what is that reason? Plantinga says there may be other reasons for thinking that, but he's not aware of any. He hasn't been able to find any in this book. So his tentative conclusion is, since these beliefs are the same with respect to evidence, they're probably the same with respect to rationality. One is rational, so is the other, even if we don't have especially good arguments for both. Now this is rudimentary Plantinga. He's just getting started. The analogy is relatively weak. He's looking at one common sense belief in other minds. He's looking at rationality. He's not looking at every other thing of interest to epistemology, like knowledge. Epistemology is not only concerned with whether a belief is rational, we're also concerned with whether we know it. Those are not the same thing. So Plantinga has a lot more work to do. He needs to look at other common sense beliefs. He needs to go into more detail on what are these similarities. Is the only similarity that they both don't seem to have any particularly good evidence for or against them? Surely we can do better than that, and in fact he does. So in other videos, as in other books, Plantinga has explained more common sense beliefs than just a belief in other minds, and more similarities between that belief and belief in God, and more things epistemology is interested in than just rationality. Just as he has done so, I plan to do so in later videos, considering these things as well. See you then.